I did forget to mention that it's not the full film that we're shooting tonight. I know some people might have thought that was the case, but we didn't quite have enough time for that. And you know, we just finished shooting 2 months ago, so it's still in progress.
Connor's still catching up on sleep.
But what you just saw, you know, might never be seen ever again. That was a snippet of selections from the film of what's been edited so far that I chose and edited for this night specifically. But I hope you enjoyed it. And we're just setting up our Zoom panelist, Christopher Yogi, and then it's good. Should we test it?
Chris, can you hear us?
I can, hi.
Oh, okay, good. You're loud, which is nice.
Okay, I'll speak softer.
You're good. So my name's Herb Tam. I'm the curator, director of exhibitions at the Museum of Chinese in America. I'm really excited to be here. I just want to introduce a few people. Chris Yogi, who's on Zoom, obviously, from LA. Our main man, Connor, Connor Warnick, and then Eleanor Young, who is a choreographer, dancer, and Chinese medicine practitioner. If you want to find out more about us, there's a program with our bios. I first want to acknowledge what an impressive and kind of historic audience this is. There's so many people, familiar faces, that were so instrumental in defining and imagining and creating what it means to be Asian American culture. And it's really exciting to be in dialogue with all of you tonight, and this is hopefully going to be a dialogue. Get your questions ready. You know, and Connor has a lot, I think, of new things to say about what is Asian American, what it means to be Asian American now. So I think it's going to be a really rich conversation. But I first want to start out with Chris, because we have limited time with him. And so Connor, I want to have you introduce Chris, because it's a really important relationship in regards to the film. It has a lot to do with A4's Van Leer Fellowship. So I wonder if you could introduce Chris, and then Chris, if you could talk about the kind of mentorship and guidance you provided. That would be an awesome way to start.
Yeah. So Chris is a director who I greatly admire. He's Hawaiian American, and his last two features, August at Akiko's and I Was a Simple Man, as well as many of his short films, were films that I learned a lot from in watching and studying them over the last few years. And as part of the fellowship, A4 was, you know, very generous and instrumental in giving me the freedom to essentially request a specific artist or director to be my mentor for the fellowship. And you know, I thought about it for almost a whole month, and you know, was looking at a wide range of different people who work in film and moving images. But it also, you know, it wasn't always easy, at least for me to, and this is something that I've experienced before, is it wasn't so easy to find a contemporary Asian American director whose work I really felt an artistic kinship with, and Chris made a lot of sense. I felt that there was a lot of overlap formally in our work, and I could recognize certain references in his films that I felt that I shared, and yeah, A4 reached out to him and was able to set it up, and you know, Chris was willing to do it, which I'm extremely grateful for. And so in pre-production, from starting in around June or July through you know, through the end of the year when we wrapped the shoot, Chris and I would Zoom regularly, and he's based in Los Angeles. And you know, I mean, at first I just shared some of my past work with him, and drafts of the script, and things I was, you know, I had a vision deck that I'd created for the film, and you know, we would go back and forth with him giving me feedback, and he helped a lot. I mean, he gave me so many nuggets of wisdom and advice, especially about making your first feature, that were drawn from his experiences. That really, you know, there were times on set where I really leaned on some of his notes. So yeah, no, I have nothing but love and respect for Chris. It was a tremendous honor and a pleasure to work with him.
Yeah, so Chris, what was it like to work with Connor, and at what point did you know, you get involved in the project, and how did those first conversations start out?
Thank you. That sounds really loud.
It's okay. It's good.
Sorry, the audio is off a little muffled, so I'll try my best here.
We can hear you very clearly.
Okay, great.
Do you want to speak questions in this phone?
Go ahead, Chris.
No, thank you, first of all, Connor, for involving me in this process, and including me on this journey. And thanks to A4 for supporting this movie. I just got a chance today to watch a cut which Connor graciously shared, and it's incredible. And sorry I can't be there tonight with you all. Yeah, I was so grateful to be introduced to Connor and his work. When they first reached out, Connor wrote a really nice letter about some of the subjects in which we would probably be kismet on, and so I thought I was curious to hear more and to watch Connor's work and to read the script, and I really did feel like there's just so much in what Connor is doing that is aligned with what I love about cinema and the kind of cinema that I want to see. And so I just did my best to support him in just giving advice whenever he needed it. And for me, you know, filmmaking is so much about the process of making the movie, and less about the final product at the end. And so always, you know, at least trying to nudge Connor to just enjoy it and to pay attention to the relationships that he's making while on this journey. And I felt like it was a very proud moment after production when Connor called me and told me that he was that he felt transformed by the experience. That's I think that's the best anyone can hope for in the making of a work of art, is that you come out the other end having grown. And so I'm just really proud of Connor and the work that he's done. Proud of the team. You guys really did an amazing job with the film.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Connor, do you remember something that Chris said that really stuck out that you kept on sort of going back to as you were, you know, shooting or editing, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first thing that jumps to mind is he was encouraging, and you know, at the beginning, at that time, there was uncertainty about whether what we were attempting was even really possible. I mean, there wasn't really a roadmap for a film like this to be made that I felt like we could, follow in terms of pre-production and production. It was insanely intense and quick turnaround to start when we did and set a target date for the shooting that we did. But Chris, pretty much at every turn, especially even in our first meeting, reassured me that it was enough time to do it, and that with his first feature, it was a comparable timeline and budget, and he gave me some specific ways in which that I could apply to our production in particular. I mean, the settings were different. I think shooting in New York versus shooting in Hawaii is, there's different challenges presented by that. But I do remember Chris, something that really stuck out to me that I used was he told me, you can be in the middle of production and still looking for locations, and like it could be the day before you're supposed to shoot something, and you might still not have found a location, and you can still do that. And you might even find it. Another thing he advised was, even if you have the locations, you should look at the surrounding areas for other locations in the event that you get there on the day of and don't like it and need to pivot. And we did exactly that a couple times. But I think it worked. I mean, there were a lot of moments where things seemed pretty insurmountable, but we really never flinched, and we stayed calm. And Chris had a lot of advice also about how to manage the set and how to make sure that people, almost on like a philosophical or a spiritual level, are all aligned, and that as the director, being able to massage that is sometimes the most important part of the job, just to get through and make the day. And he gave me techniques that he uses to preserve that. Like sometimes you might need to just clear the whole set and just be alone with an actor, or alone with the DP or someone else on the crew, and just like really work things out in the moment. And especially when you're up against tight time and space and budgetary constraints, there's a lot of times where you have to make the most with what you have, and the circumstances will force your hand in a way, but there's actually there can be a lot of freedom in that too, and it can actually be a good thing. It doesn't have to be a compromise, it can actually be a solution. So,
Yeah, I remember a shoot that you did at Columbus Park at night, and it was really cold. There was a lot of people. People were coming to you with all kinds of questions and concerns, and I remember I was really impressed how calm you were, and sort of you felt sort of at peace or something. And I bet that was probably because you were thinking about maybe what Chris had said to you. I want to talk to Eleanor. Eleanor, I don't know, I've never heard you, we've known each other for a while, but I've never heard you in this kind of format, and I have a lot of questions. I'm sure a lot of other people do too, but first of all, I don't know that you've acted before. What was that experience like? And also, Connor came to you to talk about the film, and I'm curious about what those initial conversations were like.
Yeah, it was last summer when Connor called and wanted to talk about the project that he's doing. So we sat and met. We met and sat and chatted for about 2 hours. And he was explaining to me the project and asking me about the Asian American movements of that time and basement workshop. So we had a very nice chat, and then later on he sent me a link to his previous film, and he asked whether I could be in his new film, the characters disappearing. So I looked at his previous film, made by Andy Clark, and I thought that it was really minimalist, and it seems like such a simple story about people being late. But then there were so many hidden stories and meanings and layers in the film that I was quite intrigued. So he actually reminded me of Wayne Wang when I met him in the early 70s before Chan is missing. So when he asked me to be in the film, I thought that in 1974, around the time that he's using as the backdrop, that's the time when I founded the Asian American Dance Theater and later on became the Asian American Arts Center together with my husband Bob. And we were doing cultural and artistic programming in Chinatown and across the country to trying to improve the environment and the situation for Asian Americans. And we're actually trying to make a better world for my daughter. We were very idealistic, of course. So when he asked me to be in a film to raise more visibility of Asian Americans, I said, okay, I'll try. That's how I got involved. And to your question about whether I was in a film, no, I was never in a film. But then I've always done dance performances, and I found that there's actually a lot of similarities. And a lot of the similarities is really timing. The timing of delivery in the dance movements, in a performance, and timing of speech in a film, and also to do with space. In choreography, we think about the stage and the space beyond the stage to convey a message. But in film, you look at the space, and you look at the set, and you look at the design. So there's quite a bit of similarity between the two.
Yeah, it's a beautiful way to put it. Connor, I know that research was really important part of the film. Going out and talking to people, meeting people who were, there, like Eleanor and many others who are in this room at the beginnings of Basement Workshop and who were involved in Aworkun and other, parts of the Asian American movement. Like, can you talk about the research aspect of this project and kind of what the goals were there, and how talking to these people might have changed what the film ultimately became?
Yeah. So I first began investigating into this moment in the history of New York, but also of the civil rights movement and of Asian American history in like the late summer of 2021. It was after, I can remember it was after there was a shooting at this spa in Atlanta, and I think at that time I was feeling very afraid, and I was looking for something to feel more hopeful about, but also something to an example of forms of activism and resistance from the past that maybe I hadn't learned about before, that I could find some inspiration in. But this was before I was thinking about making a film about that or anything. And I found what resources I could online about this one group called the Aworkun, or the IWK, which was a radical left-wing political group that organized in Chinatown to protest at first the Vietnam War, but then also to work on behalf of the community to counteract cycles of injustice and police brutality and housing regulations and access to education and healthcare for Asian, for Chinatown residents. And then at the same time, there was another group called the Basement Workshop that I think seems to be a bit more well documented, although I think still not quite as thoroughly in terms of its inclusion within the larger and more kind of common narratives about that time. And I think people know a lot about some of the other revolutionary ethnic groups that were these groups' contemporaries, but I don't know outside of the Asian American community that it's really taught or reported upon quite as much as it could be. And the more I learned about it, the more evident it was that the work that they were doing was very impactful. But so it was, I wasn't quite sure, exactly how this was going to work its way into a film project. It was more my own curiosity that was leading me towards these subjects, and I wanted to see what I could learn firsthand from people who were still around in Chinatown that were a part of that movement and a part of these groups. And that's actually how we met, was a friend of ours connected us and told me that you worked at MoCA and also liked basketball, and it seemed like there was a lot of common ground to connect upon. And so, but yeah, then through that, basically for the rest of 2021 and the early part of 2022, I was seeking out as many of these elders in the community as I could find, because I really didn't know much about that period, and I knew about, and to be specific, the rough period I'm talking about is from like 1968 to about 1975 or so, and I had learned about some of the comparable movements in the West Coast, and of course what was happening in China at that time, but I really didn't know much about what was happening in New York, but I always assumed things must have been happening, and indeed they were. So it started with that, but I was also developing ideas for characters that were more based on my own personal experience and my own preoccupations as a filmmaker. And the research informed that, and I felt that the more I learned about it, the more parallels I saw, and the more I felt I could transpose a personal story of my own into that context and design kind of a world that would be suggestive of both then and now. The film, I think one thing that is noteworthy about it is it is a film about multiple representations of Asian American people as well as African American people, and the way that the communities interact. And though much of the history is centered within Chinatown, the film takes place all across the whole city. It takes place in Harlem and in Queens and in Brooklyn. We were really out to represent Chinatown as well in a way that I felt was hadn't been done before. And I think that more often than not, the associations we have with the neighborhood and its past and its culture, I think, tend to lean very heavily on certain iconography and things that are more recognizable, that are certainly a point of pride and an important thing for the community and for its history, but I did feel like we had an opportunity to express it in a way that was more intimate and internal rather than necessarily leaning on those like material signifiers and then historical signifiers. And I mean, we obviously didn't have the budget to make, a completely accurate like period piece, but I honestly think even if we had had a budget for that, I don't think we would have necessarily put it towards that. I think it was more important to me to film the spaces as they were and as they are, and to suggest the past through more detailed things that I picked up from these accounts and these interviews that, these are the things I learned in those interviews aren't things that you really can learn through browsing the internet or really, what's available in biographical books and things of that nature. So in that sense, I feel like it was almost better than research, and I wasn't out to make a documentary either. I think the goal and the challenge was to I didn't feel it was always necessarily my place to tell their stories. It was more that I felt by shedding light on this and approaching it from my own perspective that was informed by the knowledge that I gained from them, that I could honor them in that way, as well as create a more unique expression about something that's owing to both eras.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you're right when you say that. The history of that period with Basement Workshop, with Iwar Kun, and it tends to be idealized or simplified in how it's contextualized within history. And so, Eleanor, you were there. Can you shed some light on what the dynamic was between these two groups and other groups, and also, I'm also really interested in, the role of artists, the role of culture in that period, how it intermingled with political activism, and just what those kind of conversations were that we wouldn't know from Googling.
Right, sure. Well, I can only speak for myself, and only from my perspective. That was the time when activism is like exploding, because we had so many incoming people from the immigrants because of the law change in 1965. So that a lot of immigrants came in from Chinese-speaking countries, and they will come into Chinatown. And Chinatown was very congested that way. And then it was right after the civil rights movement, so people are becoming more aware for self-affirmation. And then it was because of the Basement Workshop, which provided a space. So a lot of college students, college-age students and young people came together into Chinatown. They all wanted to do something. So the activism surrounded on doing something good for the community. So there are many different people as there were projects, because everybody wanted to do something that they are interested in. There was the immediate activism in terms of serving the community with service, educational programs like Children Underground, Big Sister, Big Brother projects, language classes, English classes, text classes and all that. And then there's the health issues, the health fair, the health clinic, and then there was a food co-op. So many different programs and projects kind of just popping up in the community. And then there were also that part of the people who are interested in the community that wanted to instill ideological messages to change the perspective of the community in the major society, because Chinatown was a inner city ghetto conditions with very dense population and very little services. So those people wanted to start dialogue about how to change the system. Some of them will work within the system, some of them will work on the outside of the system. They want to overthrow the system. So there were a lot of protests, the protests of Confucius Plaza and the protests against the tour buses. And there are a lot of formation of different groups, the Workers' Viewpoint and AFI and CPA. And there were residents who thought that, you know, we're so active, we must be communists. And then there were FBI agents who came to check out different people. So it was just a very intense situation in Chinatown. And then the activism continued on beyond Chinatown. There were people who wanted to build network across the country and link up colleges and university and push for Asian American studies, because at that time there were no Asian American studies. And they wanted to have the magazine to create articles and publish poetry and reviews and comic strips, short stories, political research materials and political viewpoints and editorials. So they're trying to promote this academia from the colleges and universities to bring in more Asian American professors and teachers and promote the Asian American studies and the Asian American students. So it was like all flowers everywhere, blooming, everything going on. So amongst all these activities were the arts, and the artists were creative people. They became the voice that expressed the deepest feelings of the people. They could speak louder and wider, and they adopt many different medium. They were photography, video, film. People were writing songs, singing, making dance, making theater. They were doing all kinds of workshops and classes. They were visual arts, printing, silk screening, printing materials, and even doing murals. And I think how the arts connect to the activism, the arts are the creativity of the people. If you look at it that way, then the arts are the glue that glue things together. Because you can talk about art in the vacuum, but I wanted to think about arts infiltrated and permeated throughout the society in terms of creativity. So the artists, like for example, for one night, people were putting out thousands of silk screen posters in order to strengthen a protest, a march someplace. People were going to Washington, D.C. in the Vietnam protests, and they were involved and they were concerned with the Kent State, and they were just all everywhere, the activism.
Yeah, thanks for the sort of glimpse into that
Just my
era. It's
perspective.
amazing, actually. Chris, how are you doing? Chris, you still with us? Okay. I just want to make sure, because Chris, I know, needs to sign off soon, but I did want to have a little bit of time for Chris to, Chris, just talk about the kind of larger field of movies and films that Connor's work fits into. You know, where do you see this belonging in contemporary filmmaking?
Yeah, it's really hard for me to say or to predict, I guess, to prognosticate about where a film will end up. But what I can say is that I do feel like there will definitely be an audience for this movie. It's so specific and so beautiful in its execution. And I personally was just transfixed. And I think that it also calls on so many, for those of us who love cinema, it has this timeless sort of, spirit in which it's like, feels like it's coming from some kind of pure cinema place. And so I feel like anybody who loves and who follows and devotes their life to cinema, I think if they are given the chance to watch this film, that they will like, and worldwide, to internationally, domestically. And so I think that the goal at this point is to finish the film, obviously, but also to give it a platform so that those who would love it knows that it's out there and has the ability to watch it. And that's often the trickiest part about independent filmmaking, actually, the distribution. And so, yeah, I'm here, Connor, if you want to talk about that as you move forward.
Yes, the mentorship continues. Connor, I want to go back to something Eleanor was talking about, which is that your film, the backdrop of it is, the 70s. I know you're talking about it as a quasi-period film. That's how you're thinking about it. But, the characters, they are torn. And the main character is torn between, the tension of these different groups, extremism on the one hand, or a more radical kind of idea of a more radical worldview versus one that is a little less so, though they're all involved in this milieu of like the Asian American movement and defining it. So, yeah, maybe, I don't know, we'd love to hear you speak about what you wanted to convey in terms of what the characters were going through in this film.
I think you're mostly referring to the main character of May, who's she's a leader of the group I mentioned earlier, the IWK, and in the film we do see examples of the activism that they were doing, but the challenge that she's facing internally is the group is facing many obstacles, and I think she's in a place where it feels like no matter what effort she's making, and no matter how noble it might be, it's just constantly getting running into roadblocks and getting undermined, and I think she's also starting to question whether the people that she is in the group with are really aligned with her, and whether they believe the same things anymore, and whether she can keep doing it, and putting herself through it, and what it's really for. So it is, I would say it's a film that is approaching more the question of an activist's dilemma in that way, or what happens when inevitably, especially in such an uphill battle like the one that was being fought in that context, that I do think is in some ways, there are things about it that I feel are quite translatable to our present moment, and to things I've personally experienced. That's really that is a core theme of the film. It is how she navigates that, and also how that affects her relationships, and where the line is drawn between what you give to a larger cause, to a community, and how to be selfless, but also how to navigate that as an individual, and what is right for you, and at what point does all that work start to become debilitating upon yourself, and how that can, especially for a young idealistic person, she's growing very weary, and she's also thinking about something that was really happening with the IWK at that time. Was some of them were considering moving to the West Coast, where it seemed like the movement was possibly having, you know, more of an impact, or there was more meaningful work being done, or at least that might have been the perception at the time, and that's something she's considering, but you know, it's obviously not that simple, and yeah, so those are some of the things that I feel are being addressed through her story in the film.
Great. So we've come to the point where now it's your turn to ask some questions to the audience, and I'm curious if there are, or what questions you have. Is there a mic, by the way, of going around, or no?
I think we can probably hear you.
All right, just yell out your question. Yeah.
Hi, this is for Eleanor. I wanted to ask, what was, how was it you and Connor when he was directing? What do you feel like his process is when
The question was for Eleanor, what was the process like of working with me in terms of the actor and the director relationship, and you know, collaborating together? He's curious if you could speak about that.
Yeah, it was a really nice experience working with Connor, because he's very flexible and very open, and he listens, and you know, he's not like stuck on his own ideas. I mean, he's open. So it was really a joy to work with him. I enjoyed it. I'll do it again.
Not dictatorial. That's good. Other questions? Yep, Chris.
Also for Eleanor, do you see any parallels between the main character, May, and her experiences versus your own experiences when you were, you know, actively participating in the movements?
Right. I see that there could be people like May at that time, because everything is so changing and volatile. But for myself personally, no, I don't see it, because I was very clear of what I wanted to do. So I wanted to do dance, and I wanted to do dance using the theme of immigrants, of immigration, dislocation, acculturation, isolation, of being lost. I was interested in doing dance that would show the Asian American experience. So in that, I wasn't trying to figure out what to do. I went in very clear what I wanted to do. But I could see characters like May at the time who are kind of a little lost and a little confused and couldn't quite decide not only what they wanted to do, but what their identity was.
Thanks, Eleanor. Next question. Yep.
Question about in that final scene that you showed, I really started noticing the turtle about halfway through, and I was wondering if you could share a little bit more about how the turtle was, and also like, did you predict that there was going to be some of this like movement that was happening on both sides of the?
Yeah, the turtle's owner, I don't know whose turtle it was, but we found a turtle and cast it. But the turtle is significant. Another theme in the film, and another kind of historical thread that's more derived from my own personal history, is the notion of longevity, and how things persist, and how memory changes as people age, and especially how generations interact. You know, I think that's one of the things that I'm excited about in the film, is the fact that so many of the people I interviewed our characters in the film, where, you know, I think the layers of meaning that are created by having these people in these scenes, sometimes as central characters like Eleanor, but other times they're extras or they're in the background observing these younger people of my generation playing out things that they were going through when they were our age, but 50 years later, but it's, you know, set 50 years ago. So I think that there's a nice interaction there that I'm interested in. And in terms of the turtle, the character that I play in the film has a similar obsession or an obsessive experience that he goes through in the wake of his grandfather's passing, where, as you saw in the snippet, he learns about his grandfather's father, his great-grandfather, who was a powerful, like, warlord, basically, in mainland China, and who then retired in his military career to the mountains and became, you know, like this Taoist monk, basically, and allegedly met this man there who was 250 years old, and he took the only known photo of him, and this monk was also happened to be 7 feet tall and was in like great shape, and this is all derived from my real great grandfather. He was that general, Young-sun, and he wrote a book about the time he spent with the 250-year-old man, and I found a translation of the book, and for some stretches of time I was really trying to practice some of these longevity methods, and found that, you know, in the day and age we live in, it's very difficult, and it can end up doing, I felt it ended up doing more harm than good at times, and not just to my health, but to, you know, my relationships, and it was, and I realized, you know, the way he did it really was he was alone in the mountains for like, you know, 200 years, but in the film, my character goes through a similar rabbit hole, and to bring it back to the turtle is, you know, it's something that it's a symbol that this monk would use in a lot of his writings as like an emblem of longevity, and a creature to whom he shared many lifestyle decisions, you could say. So I felt to have it as Eleanor and her husband, Gong Gong's pet, especially after Gong Gong disappears at the beginning of the film, was significant, and it's, you know, he kind of is a stand-in in that way, and yeah, I think at times the turtle felt compelled to dance as well, when Eleanor was dancing as well, and that was spontaneous. But I think my style as a director lends itself to allowing spontaneity to happen, and to having a patient hand with the camera and with time and space, so you can allow for movement like that to unfold in real time. So yeah.
Do we have time for one more? Yeah. Yes, over here.
Example or two of these longevity practices that you described?
They were mostly tied to like dietary habits, just general lifestyle. I mean, I'll give one example that my character in the film also was speaking about a little bit in that scene that you saw. This monk lived on a diet that he called the wind and dew diet, which was essentially consisted purely of his own breath and his own saliva. And he would go weeks without eating or drinking anything besides those things, and claimed that this was, one of the ways that he, through meditation and through stretching and regular exercise, was able to extend and improve his focus and his chi. I did try. I've tried, fasting at times, and I do think that there's a lot of power and freedom to be found in doing it. I learned that it's more possible than I thought it was, but as far as weeks, I definitely was not able to do that.
Eleanor, have you heard of that? You're a practitioner.
Sorry?
Have you heard of that technique?
Well, yeah, for hermits in the mountains, right? But not for us here. If they don't have to do anything, they don't have to go to work 9 to 5, or then they have all the time in the world to focus on just meditating. Then you can sit for months without food.
Right.
Yes.
All right. Well, I think. Do you have any last words here, Connor?
Well, I just want to thank everyone for coming. This was really special for me. It's not so common that you can have so many people who worked on the project, contributed to the project, followed the project, and who I personally, know, and who have known me for, some people for, a long time, and it's very meaningful to me to sit here and see everyone that's here and to have shared this with you, and hopefully we're hoping the film will be out later this year. We're aiming at some of the top international film festivals, and we're in the process of editing it currently, and you'll hear about it when it comes out. So hopefully you'll get a chance to see the full thing again, or for the first time, and then hopefully we can sit here together and watch it together when it's available. Thank you.
Yeah.